Hi guys, welcome to the channel. I just wanted to give you an ownership update on my 2015 Norton Commando 961 Sport, which I've owned for about 18 months now. I've had a few little issues with it I just want to give you an update on. Now, the history of the bike, I bought it in September 2023, had about 6,000 miles on it, and I paid about 9,500 for it. A couple of things that attracted me to this bike. One was the paint job. You won't see this on any other Norton. I love the white with the gold pinstriping. It also had the BST carbon fibre rims. One, I think, looks really good, and two, does improve the handling of the bike. And it also had a 2-into-1 Zard titanium exhaust pipe. Sounds really nice, but I swapped out later for the standard Norton short open pipes, which I think suit the bike really well, and that Zard is now fitted onto my Dominator. The first longish trip was circumnavigation of Wales. That was a 600-mile trip done over a weekend for charity, just really to get a feel for the bike, what it'd be like on a longer trip. The next one, I went to the Ardennes from South Wales. That was about 2,500 miles, mostly motorway, and I've got to be honest, this bike's not really suited for motorway miles, so that was a learning for me. The next trip I did in September 2024 was with a mate. We went down to the south of France, stayed off the motorways, and we went through northern Italy, cut up through into Switzerland, up through Germany, the Netherlands and home, and that was a round trip of just over 3,000 miles. Now, unfortunately, this bike didn't come with the service history. I was able to get a copy of the invoice from the last major service that was done, which was in June 2023, about 3 months before I bought it. And I've got a list here of the things that were done on the bike. So it had the standard service, so it had the oil filter changes done, it had the clutch and brake fluids replaced, but it also had a full strip down and inspection of the primary, and the camshaft sensor and the head temperature sensors were both replaced. Had a new battery fitted, the timing chain needed adjusting, there was a perished fuel hose which needed replacing, the headstock bearing was adjusted, and the rod for the gear selector also needed replacing. So quite a bit of work was done on it. Now, the 961 does tend to get quite a lot of negative comments made on the forums about quality issues and problems. I think, to be honest, that's probably an issue with the forums themselves. People tend to post when they have problems, maybe not so much when they're enjoying the bikes. As I say, I've had no major problems. The only real issue I had was with the rear indicator. I had a pannier rack fitted for those longer trips, and this was rubbing on the pannier rack. The vibrations caused the cover to crack, water got in there, bolt blew, so I needed to replace that. These are Aprilia indicators fitted as standard to the 961, so it wasn't a major issue to get it replaced. The other issue, I do need to keep an eye on the oil catch bottle, which is just down there by the swing arm. What happens is a lot of these 961s, they do breathe quite a lot of oil into the airbox, and that'll drain down into the bottle. So you can keep an eye on your oil level, obviously, and what oil is draining out of there. But the other thing that happens is when you wash these bikes, or if it rains, water does tend to get under the seat there, into the airbox, mixes with the oil, it goes cloudy. It doesn't create any problems with the bike, but it just obviously doesn't look very nice. Don't really want that getting into the air filter that's in there as well. So just keep an eye on that and keep that cleaned out. The other thing that I had done before the big trip was I had to replace the tyres. They were coming to end of life. So these, now I'm running Pirelli Angel STs, which I'm absolutely fine with, and no issues with those at all. I'd also done a sprocket and chain change because the sprocket was at its end of its life. Did an oil change as well myself. So I've had no major issues with the bike, but I have got a trip coming up in June, another trip to France with a couple of mates. So I wanted to get the bike prepped and ready for that. So I took it up to Stu at Motorvated in Derby for him to do a service and just have a look over the bike and make sure it's ready for that trip. The one thing that I had noticed before the service, and I asked you to check this out, was quite a lot of juddering on the front brakes. I cleaned the pads out. There's quite a lot of dust accumulation there. I thought that might be causing the problem. It got a little bit better, but then it came back again. So I just asked them to check out the front discs and make sure they were okay. A couple of other things I asked them to check out. There was some oil seeping out from under the rocker cover. I think it was coming out through the gasket, so I asked them to have a look at that and replace that. And the chain guard, I removed that just because it was rubbing against the shock springs, and it actually worn a hole through there. Stu told me that's quite a common problem with these carbon fibre chain guards. They do tend to rub against the shock. So I just asked him to have a look, see if he could do anything about that, and just try and fit it a little bit better. So Stu had a look at it. He did the annual service for me. While he had the rocker head off, he did check the torque on the cylinder head nuts. A couple of those had come slightly loose, so they needed retorquing down. So it's good that he did that. Did the standard things you'd expect, oil and filter changes, spark plugs and so on. A couple of other things though that he did notice on the bike. First of all, the chain was out of alignment. Now that's completely on me. Mistake when I fitted the chain. Now luckily no major damage done, everything's fine, but that's back in alignment now. Managed to rework that chain guard for me now, so that's refitted. There's a rubber mat at the front under the tank that had degraded and needed replacing. And on the harness at the front there, some of the tape also had rubbed a little bit, so that just needed replacing and tidying up. Now the front brake discs did need replacing. Got nice new EBC ones on there, and that's completely fixed the shuddering at braking. Now I'm not going to get into detailed costs of everything that was done to the bike, but what I will say is just the basics service that was done, the oil, filter changes and so on, and the check over, that was about £340. About 3 hours worth of work for the other bits and pieces that I mentioned. The front brake discs run to about £300, just to kind of give you an idea of the costs that I've incurred with owning the bike now for about 18 months. So the good thing now, as I mentioned, is the bike's ready to go for the trip to France. Lessons learned from that though, it's definitely worth its service getting those cylinder head nuts retorqued to specification, make sure that's all fine. Lesson learned for me as well is always make sure that any nuts, bolts, if you loosen or change any of those, always use a bit of thread lock. One thing I forgot to mention is one of the silencers was missing the 2 bolts that hold it in place. The only thing that was keeping it in place is a clamp. Now, it had an MOT a couple of weeks before the service, and that wasn't picked up. I would have thought it would be. So the only thing I can think is that maybe they rattled loose in the trip up to Derby on the motorway. It's about 150 miles. But yeah, thread lock on nuts and bolts to keep them in place. The only real problems I've got, I do get a little bit of condensation sometimes on the speedo and the rev counter. A little bit annoying, but it's not a major issue for me. Did have a problem at one point with the speedo, kept dropping down to 0 for no apparent reason while I was riding. That seems to have cured itself. Maybe that's the vibrations fix that, I don't know. But yeah, it's a 10-year-old bike. I guess any bike of that age is going to have its problems and foibles, but I absolutely love the bike. I'm now confident that I'm ready for the next big trip to France. Big shout out again to Stu for getting the bike ready for me. Yeah, on that note, the next videos I've got coming up, I'll try and give some updates as I'm going around France, let you know how that trip goes. I'm also doing some research at the moment into the development of these bikes, where and when they were developed, so the early 2000s. Picked up a few magazines from around the time, some interviews and so on, so look out for that one. And if there's anything else you'd like to know about the ownership of these bikes, drop me a comment below. Love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thanks a lot for the support on the channel. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch up with you on the next one. Cheers.